Record. Yeah. Today, the podcast will be about like history. Like we will discuss like common myths and misconceptions. Like uh, rather than going more into a topic, like we will be going more into the topic in the next session based on the discussion that we have today. And yeah, Sushma, you can go.
Yeah. So in this discussion, we'll be asking like some questions mutually uh, about these myths and all. So I just want to initiate the discussion by asking Tarun a question. So, generally, from what I heard and from what I learned from people is that so I don't know why it is said time and again. There is so much kind of feeling among people that Subhash Chandra Bose and Bhagat Singh, these people, like they are the real heroes and they are the real patriots of the country, going back to the history.
Yeah.
But the same kind of reaction we do not get for the Gandhi or Nehru. Even though in the history we read a lot about these people, but it is, among many people, I do not, I see many of them, a kind of feeling negative feedback or have negative impression about Gandhi and Nehru, but they have more positive opinion or impression on Bhagat Singh or Subhash Chandra Bose, like this. So I want to know why is this? Is this a kind of propaganda, or is it? Why are there any historical reasons in particular to this?
Uh, See, it basically comes from seeing the coloniality of the Britishers from the Indian perspective with the colonial perspective of Germans and Italians. For example, when we speak of, let's say, in our historical context, the British are the main villain. But when in the context of the world, the Germans, Japanese, and the Italians are the main villains. So there are two strains of thought that was going on during the independence. One was the Britishers are people who are reasonable. They are not like Germans or Japanese. They can be reasoned with, and we can get concessions. And this is not an ill-founded idea as well, because Ireland in 1918, I guess, got lot of independence from the British Isles. Similarly, Australia, New Zealand, these countries. And there was another stream of thought where people who oppose Britishers violently would side with the enemies of the Britishers. For example, like the way Subhash Chandra Bose sided with Germans and the Japanese. Which, when you see from Indian perspective, the selfish Indian perspective, it looks like what Subhash Chandra Bose is doing is just trying to get independence in his own way. And it seems like Gandhi is doing is kind of selfish in like acting, not allowing Subhash Chandra Bose to do that bidding. Now let's look at a global perspective rather than looking at an Indian's perspective. Indian technology at that time is no match to British technology or American technology. Now siding with Germans and Japanese is geopolitically disastrous. First of all, the Germans and the Japanese can't even defend their own home territory from British and American power. And expecting help from them to defend India in a geopolitical sense of the world is a disastrous decision. But some may argue that Subhash Chandra Bose has his intentions of getting help from Japanese and Germans, but you don't see him getting much help from them. All
Mm,
he was doing is his own independent work in Singapore.
mm,
Very little help from the British or the Germans and the Japanese. They only support in a political sense, not in literal arms supply or arms
mm,
training or anything.
yeah.
Now, imagine two scenarios where we actually side with Germans and Japanese
Mm,
and go to war with the Britishers and the Americans. The amount of life that will be lost during this process will be intolerable for any Indian. Let's say we achieve victory in doing so. Still, the country will go into civil war. Because it is India, which is already after siding with the Japanese, India will be a militarized society. So in militarized society, there will be many warlords competing for power, just like in 1900s China, where different warlords get into fight and ultimately Chiang Kai-shek wins. We would have gone through that phase, which will be much more disastrous than the partition that happened because of Gandhi and Nehru. Partition is bad. I'm not saying it is not a bad thing, but compared to the options, it is a better option compared to being destroyed by Allied bombing or British bombing. Because people don't understand, America is very, very, very efficient in killing people. You can see that in the air raids of Tokyo, where they didn't even land a single American soldier, and they bombed with B-22s and killed almost 1 lakh Japanese, with little or no loss to American lives. They are completely possible of doing that in India as well. So we can say, whether knowingly or unknowingly, Gandhi and Nehru ideology saved us from this destruction. And it is not, and also like I cannot say that the Gandhi and Nehru ideology has no, like for example, drawbacks. It has its drawbacks in, like for example, partition and the socialist kind of approach they take during the governance, and undemocratic election of Jawaharlal Nehru by Gandhi. It is a better option. I'm not saying it is a worst option, but it is a better option. And people who praise Subhash Chandra Bose for his courage and valor can do so. But when you extend his thought, India would be in much worse position.
Okay. Okay. My next question to you is that, see, basically, there are selected kings in history, whom I known only for the bad things he know. But I think even from the Ramayana also, we see that I heard from a professor that even Rama told to learn good qualities from the Ravana. Because apart from what is that, leaving this Sita thing, see everything like the ruling or being devotion. So Ravana was considered one of the greatest kings. But in our history, we see some kings to whom only the negative label is attached. So we did not see any positive side of the history about that particular king or ruler.
For
so
example?
Yeah, for example, Aurangzeb.
Yeah.
I see. Also Alauddin Khilji. What is your take on this?
So we have to look at different lenses when we analyze the kings. There are 3 lenses that we can look at, like objectively, without saying it's just an opinion. One is economy, military, and judiciary. Now, the Indian concept of judiciary comes from our mythologies, the concept of dharma. And judiciary, economy comes from Chanakya, mostly. I'm not saying perfectly, but mostly comes from Chanakya. And our notion of war comes from our ithihasas, basically, how we should fought the war. Now, when you take 2 civilizations for that matter, like for example, you have mentioned Alauddin Khilji. Now for us, the justice comes first, the war followed, and then the economy. Because you see, people who are just will be valorized more than people who have money, or people who have won the wars. Even in our mythology, even in our stories, they will be more valorized. Now that is our value structure. Now when it comes to the value structure of Alauddin Khilji, for them, war is much more important. War comes on top, economy on second, and justice on third. Now, when you look at only war perspective, for some, Alauddin Khilji looks like a great warrior. But he is very bad at managing his economy, and virtually there will be no justice. Means there will be no law or written laws. It's just something that something that vaguely sticks together. That's why you see all the Delhi Sultanates were succeeded through assassination. Almost
Yeah.
all.
Mm.
Similarly, you can see Mughal period is relatively calm period when compared to the Delhi Sultanate period during the
Mm.
successions. You don't see that succession wars in pre-Mughal or pre-Delhi Sultanate period because succession we don't value that much in succession. Means we don't value that much in economy or power.
Mm.
For us, people who will be remembered are the one who followed that justice. So people see them in different lenses.
Okay.
For example, Aurangzeb, who it's basically all the kings that are from Delhi Sultanate to Maghana, Rebenshaft economies. Rebenshaft economies are basically if there is no wealth in the country, they will ride the country that is wealthier and they'll take that wealth and they replenish their goods.
Okay.
Now, this is not specific to Delhi Sultanates or Mughals. This is the law that was followed by all the barbarian tribes, whether it is Scythians from the Central Asia, or Xiongnu from North Mongolia, or Mongols from Mongolia, or Turks from the Central Asian part that we see. They all follow this rule. Now, that is their way of living. Now, when we apply our values to their way of living, they look like completely bad to us.
Mm.
Now, when they apply their rules to us, we look like complete weak people who cannot fight wars. So it depends on the perspective that you see. Means it depends on your whole moral structure.
Mm.
People who value war will say Alauddin Khilji is
Mm.
great. But
Mm.
people who value law will say Alauddin Khilji is a terrible ruler.
Yeah.
Similarly, you can see in the description of Chengiz Khan as well. Now, this is
Mm.
exact reverse. Like, for example, now we consider Turkic tribes that are Delhi Sultanates and Mughals to be
Mm.
barbarians compared to us. Now, the Turkic tribes that the Delhi Sultanates and Mughals compare uh, Mongols as barbarians.
Okay.
Means there is a level of destruction. The level of see people don't understand the level of destruction that the Genghis Khan did on Khwarezmian Empire is so
Mm.
massive that it reduces the footprint of human beings on Earth. He killed
Okay.
90% of Iranian population.
Mm.
It was done in 1200 and it took almost 600 years for Iran to replenish that population, come to the normal state.
Mm.
So for them, the Mongolians look very barbarians when
Mm.
compared to themselves. They consider themselves to be civilized when compared to Mongols. So it depends on the kind of perspective that you're seeing.
Mm. Okay. Mm. Okay. So yeah. The
Yeah, I
next
want to ask
question.
something like I'm very big in economy. So
Mm.
uh, communism as an ideology is an
Yeah.
always failure. Like you can see that in Russia,
Mm.
you can see that in China, you can see
Mm.
that in North Korea.
Mm.
But somehow Indian communists seem to survive in some states, Kerala, West Bengal. Now,
Yeah.
why do
Yeah.
you think this became like a like this managed to survive that communism,
Okay.
communist ideology?
Okay. I do not have that much idea, but I try to. I mean, from my analysis, what I understand is that see, the Kerala people are more educated and they are more aware of the things than the other state people.
Hmm.
So maybe, in my opinion, um, since they understand the values of communism and they have opted for it very consciously.
Uh, yeah.
So that's why I think, but I don't know the case of West Bengal. I'm not aware of it.
Um, I have a very different perspective. I don't think Kerala people are like well-educated people. If they are well-educated, they
Okay.
will know the bad things that the communism did, but they seem to know nothing about that. Uh,
Okay.
so I'll tell you my perspective whether I'm like you can judge me whether I'm good or bad.
Mm.
Like if you see the rise of communism, let's consider three states: China,
Mm.
Russia, or and North Korea. All the three states,
Mm.
when communism has started, are agrarian societies,
Mm.
and through heavy state machinery, they got industrialized,
Mm. Mm.
and they are sustain. When the communist state is sustaining, they are extracting that wealth from that industry, right?
Mm.
And they sustained their, for example, the industry that survived in Soviet Union during the World War II became a base for its reconstruction after World War II. Now that's why you
Okay.
see, like, China, Russia is the um, superpower of exporting weapons, like after America.
Mm.
Like they export weapon a lot, and the base comes from the World War II, because during that time the industrialization process, the militarization of industry has started. Similarly, you can see in China, where the heavy Chinese population will be utilized as free labor by the Communist
Mm.
Party to do the farming, agriculture, and everything. And
Mm.
through that, they industrialized as manufacturing
Mm.
unit. That's why
Mm.
you don't see China making great processors or AI chips and these things, but they'll make
Mm.
all the low level stuff. The chips that will
Mm.
go into your remotes and the chips that will go into your speakers, those are all made by
Mm.
Chinese.
Mm.
So they create a huge industrial um, labor force that can
Mm.
do
Mm.
kind of semi skilled labor,
Skilled about.
semi
Mm.
skilled and to skilled labor. Now,
Mm.
North Korea has two phases. Like from 1950 to 1970, it was subsidized by
Mm.
both Soviet Union and Maoist China, where it
Mm.
industrialized rapidly.
Mm.
When till 1970, North Korea was always considered as a success story compared to South Korea.
Mm. Mm.
So in 1970, what happened was basically the mood of Chinese and the American communists are changing. They understood that they cannot subsidize the countries outside China or Soviet Union. You can see that in Deng Xiaoping's Deng Xiaoping's son, who is that American president who got uh, I don't know, like there was one American president and Deng Xiaoping who met and made some economic deals,
Mm.
which was
It's
not
not.
the communist way
Mm.
of doing it. And
Okay.
also you can see in Leonid Brezhnev, who
Mm.
slowly started liberalizing the economy of Russia. Khrushchev
Mm.
and Brezhnev were considered as liberals when compared to Stalin.
Mm.
So they forcefully deindustrialized North Korea,
Okay.
because an industrialized society produces a middle class,
Mm.
and that middle class will
Mm.
ask for the rights, individual
Employment. Yeah.
rights,
Mm. Mm. Oh.
and will reduce the power of the state. So in
Mm.
order to maintain the power of the state, they deindustrialized the society.
Mm.
That's why you see the totalitarian North Korea that it is now. Now,
Mm.
when you come to West Bengal and Kerala, if you take West Bengal is the most industrialized society by 1950.
Mm. Mm.
So when communists came into power, they started
Mm.
deindustrializing it.
Okay.
So you can see during the process of deindustrialization from 1950 to 1990, the communist
Mm.
can extract the wealth that is
Mm.
coming from deindustrialization and distribute it to the people,
Mm.
and they can fulfill their promises for the people through this process.
Okay. Mm.
Now when the deindustrialization stops and it has no value, means it doesn't give us any wealth, then you can see the
Mm.
slow shift of people from communist to other
Power.
other political
Yeah.
parties,
Power.
like for
Yeah.
example Trinamool Congress or BJP in the West Bengal case. Now
Mm.
Kerala is a curious case, because from 1950 to
Mm.
70,
Mm.
kerala Kerala is kind of progressive when compared to the other Indian states,
Mm.
because of its Travancore kingdom. Travancore is
Mm.
matrilinear kingdom, where women have most of the
Okay.
powers.
Okay. Okay.
So the patriarchal society, when it meets this matriarchal aristocracy,
Mm.
it kind of
Mm.
produces a balance, not
Okay.
perfect balance, but kind of produces
Mm.
a balanced society. So you see from
Mm.
1950 to 1970, most of economic activity going, like for example, the
Mm.
agricultural activity going in Kerala, and most of the
Mm.
people from Kerala going into military.
Mm.
Like there
Mm.
used to be huge Malayali military. regiments.
Yeah.
Now, when 1970s hit and when oil was found in, I think during 1970s itself, right? When oil was found in Saudi Arabia and these Gulf countries, there is slow
Yeah.
movement of labor from Kerala to these Gulf countries.
Gulf countries. Yeah.
Because it was giving them more money when compared to doing work in India. So they started like earning, like saving their savings and sending it to Kerala, which is independent of what government the Kerala is running.
Yeah.
The money will come no matter what. That's why you see in Kerala a big bungalow with a Tata house, Tata car. Usually in any other state with that big bungalow, we should have an Audi or BMW. But in Kerala, they usually save their money in the Gulf, and as a one-time settlement, they'll build that house. And the rest of the thing, they'll use that for maintenance, like maintaining that house. That's why you see, as long as the money is flowing from Gulf to Kerala, the communists can survive.
Okay, but see, it need not be a communist party, right? See, since it is independent of government, why do still the people incline towards that particular party?
Because
Others
communist,
can.
yeah, I understand. Like because the communist ideology is basically redistribution of the wealth. Now, when you take wealth from a citizen, let's say the person who is doing the farming, you take wealth from that, he will definitely revolt. Now, when the wealth is not generated by this farmer, the wealth is coming somewhere from other country.
Okay.
And redistributing that wealth, you don't see that much of a revolt in the populace.
Okay.
The people who are voting will not revolt because the wealth is coming from somewhere else.
Okay.
And the people living outside the country will also not cause problem because that might affect their return back. If they go against the government, they may get into some trouble. And
Find
getting
those
into
consequences.
getting into trouble in Gulf countries is very, very bad.
Okay.
For any other country citizen.
Okay.
So there is this balance of wealth generation and wealth distribution in the communist society. Yeah. So when this balance is disturbed, you see the governments changing. Like there will be a lot of disturbances in the government. For example, the BJP is slowly raising in Kerala, not because of its political power or anything, because the per capita income of an average Kerala citizen is increasing, which is nothing special to Kerala. In entire country, it is increasing, but you can see the effects in Kerala because they understand how much a citizen is losing for the party, for the government. Now they can clearly see how much. For example, if you are making 100 rupees, right? If the government will take 20 rupees and give you full meals, which takes you 20% of the bills and give you full meals, you are okay with that because your earning is very less and you have to survive. You don't know whether you can survive with 100 rupees for every day. Now the government is guaranteeing it will give you money. Now let's say you are making 1,000 rupees per day and you have to give 20%, which is 200, and the government will serve the same food. You will say, I don't want this food. I can buy this food, better food for outside with this 200 rupees. Why I should give you?
Yeah.
Despite of the same person giving the same percentage of wealth, you can see the revolt slowly happening.
Yeah.
Now, because of this middle class rise in entire India, you are seeing more effects in Kerala. And you see a gradual, just like the thing that happened to the Communist Party in West Bengal, will be reflected in the thing that happened to the Communist Party in Kerala.
Okay. Okay. So I want to ask another question. See, in Indian history, we see the kind of a paradoxical situation happening during the Gupta Empire. Because on the one hand, we see like the we had many intellectuals and very important books which dealt with the astronomy and many things related to space and other aspects in the Gupta Empire itself. So from this we can understand that on the one hand, what does it indicate or what does it imply? The society is progressing,
mm,
isn't it?
mm,
Because of the thinking and because of the rational.
mm.
From their books only we can infer that. But on the other side, what we see is also uh, before Gupta Empire also, there may be some kind of social evils or some social degradation happening. But we see that is taking more
Rapid.
so that kind of incidents and yeah rapidly and increasing during the Gupta Empire, be it the caste system or be it the woman status in the society. So that is from that we can understand that the Gupta Empire is a backward society. So how does this how did it manage to happen? Like on the one side we see the progress, but at the other side we see the degrading values in the society.
Okay.
So, what is your take on this?
So like, see, whe- when you consider only in Indian perspective, Gupta Empire seems like a progressing society. But
Mm,
when you consider the global aspect, Gupta Empire is a reaction to the Alexander invasion of India.
mm,
So uh, till that time, India is a very closer society. It has an interaction with the Persian Empire, but the interaction
mm,
is kind of fixed. Like they know that both empires cannot control Afghanistan, so
mm,
they have some demarcation lines. The wars are very ill fought.
mm,
Now suddenly in 300 BC, there comes a guy who destroys that Persian Empire and come in close
mm,
contact with the Nanda Empire.
mm,
So this produces a reaction in Indian population telling that a foreigner is willing to invade India, which doesn't happen for almost like the past 1,000 or 1,200 years. Means serious invasions doesn't happen. Invasion that will
mm.
destroy the culture of the Indian society,
Yeah.
the way that Alexander did.
Mm,
So they formed a very rigid society. It's rigid in the sense of like a very disciplined society.
mm,
Whereas kingdoms during before Nanda period are very kind of republican. They are willing to
mm,
consider the like for example Magadha's empires and these empires like
mm,
Shodasa Mahajanapadas. They're kind of republicans
mm.
only. Means the citizens have a say in the government. Now, when you come to Maurya period, you understand that it will become kind of state control. That's why you see in Chanakya Empire also, he writes about state control basically. How a state sitting
Mm,
at the center have to control the
mm,
entire territory. There will be
mm.
no like interaction between the people. Yeah, the king should know what the people is thinking, but it is
Yeah.
not always that it should be reflected in his policies. Like the king can take decisions that go against the people in order to protect the country.
Uh, yeah, that may be okay, but see from Chanakya's writings, he clearly mentioned that the king's happiness should lie with the happiness of his subjects.
Yeah,
So
but
he
not
clearly
opinion.
mentioned,
See,
yeah.
the opinion sometimes the opinions coming from the population may lead
Mm,
to the destruction of the population itself.
mm,
So he said
okay.
clearly to avoid that and take decisions based on the intellect of the king only,
Mm,
not through the
mm,
opinion of the people. Like
mm,
he's a fatherly figure,
okay.
not a friend.
Mm,
So you see this rigidity more and more. Like for
mm,
example, the state will become more and more centralized. Uh, when you come to Ashoka period,
mm.
the the gods of Ashoka, the personal gods of Ashoka were not Indians; they're Greeks. Greeks from
Okay.
Afghanistan.
Mm, mm,
You see it kind of getting more and more like Greek kingdoms, the more centralized
mm,
kingdoms. So
mm,
the more and more that the power that you gives to the centralized kingdom,
mm,
the more the king can impose the rules.
mm,
So usually the kings will keep holy scriptures as their validation and try
mm,
to control the people. So
mm,
that's what you see that was happening in Indian society from Maurya period to Gupta period. When Gupta period, it will become more and more rigid. Yes, it was economically progressive, but the laws will become more and more rigid. By 4th century BC, you can see strict caste control in society.
Yeah.
Strict endogamy means marrying in their own caste. Before that, it used to be kind of intermixed. Because when the success of the Maurya Empire ensured the population or the kings that if we follow in this path, we will be safe from the invasions. Because you have to understand, when an Indian sees a Greek, he's seeing an alien, basically. An average Indian, when he see a Greek, he's basically seeing an alien who his ancestors has never seen or recorded. So it is a kind of reactionary politics that is going on. They see the success of Maurya Empire as the success of the rules that it has kept. Because of the following rules, we are protected, so we should make it more and more rigid. So you see the books like Manusmriti that was coming during like 100 BC or something, and it will become more and more rigid in Gupta period, like 4th century BC, which will gradually lead to the decline of Indian empires.
Okay.
Even though economically they are very strong. You can see India was never economically backward until like 15th century AD. It was always like 1/4 of entire GDP of the globe. Yeah.
But from where do you think that these kind of they have written wonderful books. I mean, which are more informative. So, how do you think that this kind of knowledge, like, can penetrate more into the society? Because we see, so we see the education and all were given to a particular section of community back then. How does, but then how can, how was it possible that there were many writers in the Gupta Empire itself?
Means I didn't understand the question. Like, even though it was education is given to particular community, how can there be more writers?
Community, and also, as you said, that there was this rigidity, like the rules and all, they were very strict. But how was it possible for them? Like, how did this progressive thinking or mindset could develop in people of that era?
No, there will be two strains. You see, like in every kind of society, there will be people who are very progressive on writing things, the progressive thing, and people who are very conservative on defending those things. Like when you see the trajectory of history, you will see like which idea is more validated. Here, when you see that trajectory, the conservative idea is more validated by the society. So it will be more of like an interaction. There will be progressive ideas also, but they will be rejected. Like for example, during the all the ideas of the Renaissance were there during the Greek period also, were there during the medieval period also, but the church didn't accept during the medieval period. Why in only during the Renaissance these ideas are accepted is because the thoughts of the people changed because of their economic condition or because of the industrialization. So this will be reflected in the laws that people like the rulers will be adopting.
Okay.
Here the conservative laws were validated by the people, telling that okay, this will sustain our society.
Okay.
So the rurals also slowly started adopting it and making it a law. Yeah, I think the time was up. Shall we go on to another episode or?
Yeah, I mean, I just have a last question.
No,
how
it
much
was
time we are
time of
left?
like 1 minute. That's it.
Okay. Then yeah, we can discuss it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Sushma, you can go.
Yeah. So my last question to Tarun would be, you have studied about different empires. So, if I ask you, what are the three best things you like in three different empires?
Yeah, Sush. Yeah, you're struck actually. Mm.
Yeah.
Hello.
హలో
Yeah.
ఏ
Yeah.
ఏంద్రా వినిపిలేదా?
Now I can hear you. Like you say, the question was like, what do you like about three different empires that we can
What
learn
are the
from?
three best things we can learn from in?
Yeah, first empire I would go with is the Roman Empire. Like I think it was the kind of peak civilization from Iron Age. Like after the Iron Age, the peak of the civilization that you can see is in the Roman Empire. Like many will say, like the Chinese Empire, like much more advanced, or they have made more inventions. Like yeah, people, many like for example, numbers were invented in India, but we didn't invent formal mathematics. That was done by Europeans. So you can when you the reason that I like the Romans was their integration of philosophy with mythology and producing a kind of independent economy that is not very centralized and producing very formidable armies that work independent of the ruler. Like for
Okay.
example, in India or China, you can see the armies depends more on the king. I like the separation of these things in the Roman Empire.
Okay.
The separation of army, separation of the economy, and the separation of this philosophy and mythology. But the emperor is just a benevolent dictator who will just direct those things rather than going and getting involved. When you see, for example, any other empires, for example, Indian, Chinese civilization, Indian civilization, or the Persian civilization, the king plays a very, very important role in army. The failure or loss of the kingdom mostly depends on the king, which is not in the case of Rome. You can see even the emperor is very, very bad. You can see the marshals and the generals or the legionnaires doing their job, and they produced a formidable army. Like people don't understand, like Rome was formed in 753 BC, and it all survived in many forms till 1453, which is like 2000 years old civilization. Imagine the principles that was made by the Romans carried all the way up to 1453, and they became the base of the Renaissance that Europeans built. So I like that structuralization. Like if we, in India, even we are, when we are studying Indian history, when we talk about Gupta period, we talk it very vaguely. We say that the laws are
Yes.
this, the economies are this, and there is no concrete thing because the kings are very not very concrete subjects. It is whatever the king says that usually change every day. Unlike Rome, which is like standardized, everything is standardized for the most part. That's why you see in any other civilization, you see the individual structures. Like you can see this guy is great. You see private structures. For example, the Tipu Sultan Palace, which is made for Tipu only. The Red Fort, which is made for Mughals. The Chinese palace, which is made for the emperor only. But when we go to Rome, we don't see the emperor palaces. You see Pantheon, which was made for the assembly, actually,
Okay.
not for the king. And you see public baths, which are made for the public purpose, not for any particular person. And Colosseum, which is like a stadium for public. The great structures of the Rome are made for public,
Okay.
whereas the great structures of any other civilization are made by individual for kings. So our entire kind of democracy and everything comes from the Roman Empire. That's why I kept it first. And the second civilization was Russian civilization. Why Russian civilization? Because you cannot like define Russian civilization based on the kings. Russia has gone through many phases. Despite of that, the Russian people are very, very, very resilient. Like when they say like Indians and Americans are patriotic, when they say like Indians or Americans are patriotic, just go and see the Russian patriotism. Like it will be on another level. They don't have connection for the government. They only have connection for the land. It doesn't matter which government is this, whether it is Stalinist government, or whether it is Putin's government, or whether it is Ivan the Terrible or the Tsars. They have same law for the land. They'll protect the land no matter what the king is. Which is not in the case of India or America, where you can see a small thing will occur. If the party, the party
More
that they like
connected to
doesn't
the.
win, yeah, they'll say that India is bad. And immediately if the party wins, they'll say that India is the best country. You don't see that flips in Russia, because they have a particular connection to the land and particular connection to the people, and they have their own civilization in their mind.
Okay.
And the third one, I think it was American civilization, though it is like very small, like the history of it is very small, but the kind of values it produced to the world can be considered as something very, not in the economic sense, but in the kind of human rights sense, like how the individual rights. Like whether I say Rome or Russia, you don't
Russia.
see individual rights much, because they are always represented as communities. The Rome is for Romans; it is not for individual citizens. You can see the public kinds of construction that the Romans did. But when you come to America, they take the good parts of the Roman and the kind of Russian ethos, which basically comes from the Byzantine Empire, like which is an offshoot of Rome, and they combine it and they produce a very compact document, which is like Constitution. For them, there are like 10 amendments. That's it. And through these 10 amendments, they are able to produce one of the magnificent civilizations. Like if you see, people don't understand the strength of America as a country. Like it has an army which is much more powerful than the rest of the 10 armies below it combined. The Air Force of the Navy, the Air Force of the Navy of American Navy is much more stronger than the Air Force of the countries. They can move their fleets and they can control oceans for the most part. Like you can see, like many countries, whether it was China or Russia or India, they can project their power. Like for example, India can't even project its power into Afghanistan. Whereas America, which is on the other side of the continent, other side of the globe, can project the power.
Okay.
Which comes from that harnessing that individual power, harnessing that invention. Now you can see, now people will say that America is degrading, kind of. It's a phase. Like I think it will come out of that phase, possibly in the future. And why I didn't mention India, like because after Iron Age, India, I would say, would be in top civilization category. Like if you say what are the top 5 civilizations, that will be in category, but was never number one. The only time the Indian civilization was at its peak is during Harappan age. Because you can see the kind of standardization in the weight measurements and the kind of dockyards that they built, the kind of wealth distribution in the society. When compared to any of the Stone Age civilization, it is the best civilization to live on. It has very little war, and it has abundance of food. And there was fairly good law and order. And the destruction of Harappan civilization is not violent. Like people will conflict that too, because I think the end of the Harappan civilization was around 700 BC, 1700 BC, and like the late Harappan period was 1700 BC, I guess. And the Aryan invasion or the Iron migration starts during 1100 BC. There is 500 years of gap. So the Aryan invasion or migration didn't destroy the Harappan civilization. More probably, it is caused of kind of climate change or drying up of Saraswati River. Yeah, those kind of things. So when we speak of Indian civilization, the peak of the Indian civilization, Harappan civilization is at its peak in every category. But we don't consider it as heritage. So that was my take on the like civilizational issue.
Okay, then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Shall
the
we end
end
this?
of the discussion.
Yeah, I'll
Sure.
stop the recording.